I think our best place to start is really from a Norwegian perspective, looking at this from Oslo. What on earth is this all about? This pipeline. Why is a pipeline causing political controversy? Why should there be an issue about, from a Norwegian perspective, a pipeline is a pipeline is a pipeline. Where is the problem? Surely it's merely about the Ukrainians getting worried about their transit fees. And there is more to it, far more to it than transit fees. I mean, we're talking about another pipeline being built in the Baltic Sea in parallel with Nord Stream 1. But what this really is about, from a security perspective to start with, is not about Ukraine specifically, but the transit security of the Central and Eastern European states. Currently, a large part of their gas comes through the Brotherhood pipeline via Ukraine into Central and Eastern Europe and on into Western Europe. And the consequence of that is that it gives all of those states some degree of transit security. Brutally, the Russians can't cut off the Central Eastern Europeans without cutting off parts of Western Europe. And that transit security is a very real and substantial point of security for those states. And this is not theoretical. I mean, there's a very well-known paper, almost book, it's about 300 pages long, by Robert Larsson from the Swedish Defence Research Agency, which identifies 40 politically motivated energy cut-offs by the Russian federations in the region between 1991 and 2004. And there have been a number of them since then as well. The other issue, from a Norwegian perspective, is that if you have Nord Stream 1 with 55 billion cubic meters of gas being carried under the Baltic Sea from Russia directly to Germany, and then you have another 55 billion cubic meters, altogether about 110 billion cubic meters, you've got about 70% of all Russian gas imports to Europe coming down a very narrow 2-kilometer channel in a very shallow sea. This is like creating an artificial Straits of Hormuz problem. And aside from any prospect of the Russians cutting off the gas, is simply the prospect of accident or terrorism, and then it taking months to repair those pipelines. And no doubt the call would then go out, Oslo, help us. It is a supply security risk, which I am just amazed that any Western state would want to take. But what I think is, from a Norwegian perspective, much more significant than all of that even, is that Norway is part, via the EEA, of the European legal order. And one of the concerns about Nord Stream 2 is its broader and more substantial effect on the ability to maintain the European legal order. The point that Carl was making earlier about the importance, the value of the single normative order that we have to run the single market and maintain our values across the whole of European territory depends on uniform application of the rules. And the problem with Nord Stream 2 is principally that the rules are not applied uniformly. An example of this is in relation to the non-application of EU energy law, particularly the Gas Directive 2009, to the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. I mean, the pipeline is on the territorial, runs through the territorial seas of Germany and Denmark. It runs through the inland waters of Germany and the soil of Germany. It physically is on EU territory. And it would have significant impact if it were applied. For example, the ownership unbundling rules of the third energy package would apply, the tariff rules would apply, the third-party access rules would apply. Now, of course, when I have debated this with a number of Gazprom lobbyists, they say, but EU law does not apply. Well, the problem with that is that we actually have EU law directly applying to import pipelines. For example, to the Yamal pipeline, which runs through Russia and then through Belarus into Poland. And I have various arguments which are raised. One is to say that, it runs through a non-EU state. Interesting, but irrelevant. Then they say, it's connected to other pipelines. Again, interesting, but actually that would also mean that Nord Stream 1 was subject to EU, and Nord Stream 2 was subject to EU law as well. Then they say, and this is my favorite, is that EU law, the difference with YAML is that it's on land and our pipeline is in the sea. And I think this is a fantastic argument, and the Brits could deploy this in Brexit, because you may have noticed we are an island. So, one way around Brexit is to say, we're in the sea. We can stay in the European Union and not apply EU law. This fantastic Russian argument we can apply also. How nice is that? And then, of course, I get a series of what about arguments. And long lists of pipelines are given which were created 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 5 years ago, i.e. all before the third energy package came into force. And the difficulty with all of this is that it creates a sense amongst the Central and Eastern European states that there is one rule for Germany, there is a Lex Germania, and then there's another rule for everybody else. And this is unbelievably corrosive to the maintenance of EU law and the normative order we're trying to sustain. And I have to say this, that last week I was at the GlobeSat conference, and I raised this just as broadly. I am concerned about the future and the ability to sustain the European legal order. And what was amazing, it was like dropping a grenade, because I said this, and all the Central Eastern Europeans all came up, officials, think tankers, commentators, all with the same line, that this was a real bright line. And it changes fundamentally their view of the European Union. And what my real deeper concern than anything else to do with Nord Stream 2, beyond the supply security issues and so forth, is the extent to which, if Nord Stream 2 goes through, then the European legal order itself is in jeopardy, and indeed the European Union. And I think deep in the Berlin bubble, there is no awareness of the scale that is of the damage that's being done, both to Germany's own standing and then to the Union as a whole and its integrity. Now, I'll end on one small Brexit point, which is, of course, if I had a Palmerstonian British government operating in usual fashion to divide and rule with great strategic vision, the European Union would be in serious trouble. We would be using Nord Stream in order to divide and conquer. But at least the EU has the tremendous advantage that you have a crazy British government who doesn't do strategy. So at least that is one advantage for the European Union at the moment. And on that point, I'll stop. Thank you very much.